All right, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thanks to Harry for the introduction, and really appreciate ARRC and everyone that comes out to the forum this week. It's an awesome opportunity to collaborate and learn from each other. So I just prepared a few slides. I'm going to touch on the key points, really around what Harry had already introduced. ExxonMobil's been on a journey in relation to open process automation for more than a handful of years. Many of you have been along on that journey, and for those that haven't, again, this hopefully is a useful update. That journey has most recently culminated in a lot of activity supporting the OPA forum in terms of the standards development, and then within ExxonMobil and our R&D program, really doing product testing, qualification, and development consistent with taking technology into our manufacturing facility. Well, what's behind a lot of this effort, beyond really visioning around what's the next generation automation system, the next generation DCS and PLC type functionality, is really how our automation plays a role in our digital transformation journey. A lot of discussion today, especially in the General Assembly, the general sessions, around the digital journey we're on, the transformation. We really see the control system, the automation system, as an important component of that, not only for things traditionally thought of as time series data, but also event data, all the modern forms of data you would expect to have in your analytics and your solutions are now available at the edge, right? At the control edge with your sensors, whether that's video, vibration sensors. How do we bring all that data into our decisioning, into our control actions without necessarily requiring operator intervention, right? And so we see OPA as a platform that gives us a lot of optionality in how we deliver those solutions both today and into the future. So this slide, it's fairly succinct and brief, but really outlines a lot of sweat equity over the last, handful of years, as I mentioned, right? From concept in the 2010 timeframe to thinking about what is the next generation of automation system, how can that better meet ExxonMobil's needs as an operating company and end user, if you will, of technology. And so that culminated in several years of thinking, soul searching, and internal work that really led us to be a part of the founding members of the OPA Forum, which happened in 2016, which was, let's get together with the industry, both suppliers, end users, system integrators, service providers, and let's work together and collaborate to really set the future in motion. From an ExxonMobil, I know, much of this is not new news again to this community in the forum. We've shared this story, so I'm going to be fairly brief. And so we advanced from the standard setting effort with the OPA forum, again, that I mentioned, kicked off in 2016. Internally in ExxonMobil, we did what we called a proof of concept, which was really an offline development system to demonstrate the art of the possible. That was conducted, and then that was followed shortly thereafter in 2019 and 2020 with what we called a pilot implementation of OPA. So where we implemented that in a pilot plant in our New Jersey facility that was on pressure, on temperature, with hydrocarbons, though it was small in scale, risk appropriate for new technology application. Really, the success there and the learning, we channeled some of that back into the OPA forum and our contribution to the standards development. But ultimately, we leveraged that experience to do what we called the test bed, right? And so we worked with, in particular, with Yokogawa as our system integrator over the last 2 years in a facility outside our main campus, outside of Houston in the Woodlands, to really get down with the actual products that are available in the marketplace, both the mixture of commercial and pre-commercial products, and really put them to test, right? What actually meets the intent of the OPA standards as they exist today? And so that's the journey we've been on for the last 2 years, collaborating with numerous suppliers, many of you represented in this room, so thank you for that. And that's culminated in a lot of learning, but we're not just doing this for R&D's sake, obviously, right? And so The intent here is to drive the technology forward with industry, supported by a foundation, which is the standards, and work with the OPA forum in that endeavor to add value to our business, right? And to add value to our business, we need to take the technology to a field in a reliable, robust manner that's supportable for the life cycle of the asset and the investment, right? And so really that's culminated in our first pre-commercial application of OPA, which we call our field trial. I mentioned this and really announced this last year at this forum, which is taking an OPAF-based system, implemented it in one of our plants in the Gulf Coast in Baton Rouge, really providing the mission of the DCS and PLC functionality that exists there today. So replacing some obsolete systems that are there today. So that gives us an opportunity to manage obsolescence with a system that's upgradable on the fly, incrementally over time. And it gives us the opportunity to introduce new value for that business line. So it is a return project. It's not just a replacement in kind, obviously, technology, and it's not a no return project. This project comes with return that is enabled by OPA uniquely. So my sales pitch, I kind of put some words at the bottom of this slide is, okay, so I just outlined a little more than 7 years of investment, right? A lot of sweat equity by a lot of people in ExxonMobil, as well as other folks in the forum, obviously, throughout industry. I guess my sales pitch is, hey, let's benefit from this, right? And I'm going to get to this later in my presentation, but we spent, I wasn't allowed to put the number in. My law and P&GA folks said I couldn't say how much we spent, right? That's probably appropriate not to put that in there. But a lot of money and a lot of effort, right? A lot of sweat equity. And we're willing to share that with industry. This is not about developing a solution for ExxonMobil. It's about developing a solution that moves our automation system capabilities forward into the future. It's about leveraging technologies that's available in IT, the best of IT and OT, to meet our business needs and add value to our investments in the automation space. So again, I touched on a lot of the background, the 1,000-foot view. What is the field trial? Again, it's a plant in the Gulf Coast. I mentioned Baton Rouge. It's part of our chemicals manufacturing affiliates that operates there. We intend to go to the field, and our design is all based on the current OPA standard, version 2.1, which the preliminary release was in late 2020, if I recall right, and the final release was just issued here recently. So that's available. Again, this is a single operator, single console operation. So, we're not going into a super complex plant with a lot of interactions. That wouldn't be risk appropriate for applying new technology that's pre-commercial, right? So it is risk appropriate. That was part of our criterion for selecting this site, as well as the thought went into a site that would benefit from the investment of new technology, right? And so a site that in this case was, underinvested and had some obsolete control system and PLC equipment. Scale of that is listed here. It's about 2,500 I/O, 100 control loops. So significant, right? I mean, the key here is take a step forward. The concept was about 20 times as big a deployment as we did in our pilot. To take that to the field, and the next step, the thought is then to be able to scale and go 20 times bigger than this potentially. But to be seen by demonstrated success in the field trial. The startup will be later this year with project closeout in the first half of 2024. So I can go into a little bit more detail, but I'm going to reserve some of that for the Q&A. Obviously, we talked at the last ARC forum a year ago about the advanced compute platform. That's one of the components that we're going to implement in the field. The mention of VMware, Dell, and Intel, Schneider Electric, and Yokogawa. We've all been working together to implement a technology set that we feel like differentiates OPA versus what's available in the marketplace today. That gives us a lot of capability in terms of compute and storage to execute not only your regulatory and supervisory control, but to do much more than that, to do your analytics at the edge. And when I say at the edge, we're talking next to the sensor. Could be on the sensor, but in this context, I'm talking next to the sensor. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. So I guess just a brief mention at the bottom of the slide. All this OPA, being the this in this construct, is underpinned by the standards, right? So by the work the forum's been doing. Many of you in the audience, I recognize have been involved in that and have a lot of your own investment of time and thought and ideas. That is really the foundation that we have to build upon to make this an industry-lasting change, right? And so there's still work to go. I'll touch again briefly on that at the close, but I really impress upon the importance of continuing to make standards, to push forward in 2023 to really drive us from the current version of the standard I mentioned, version 2.1, to the next release of the standards to fill in some additional white space that gives us a solid basis to commercialize OPA solutions in the marketplace and to really drive the technology forward around OPA. Obviously in the middle of this slide, as I mentioned, capability, right? And so from an ExxonMobil perspective, getting hands-on with the technology, what are the products available in the marketplace today, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what integrates, what's interoperable, what's interchangeable, all the quality attributes we're after, requires a bit of investment, both in kit, in terms of a development system, test bed, as well as your people, right? Getting your people knowledgeable, comfortable, that these solutions can meet the needs of historically what we've called a DCS and a PLC, and do it better and do it cheaper. So really it takes getting hands-on with the technology set and the products and technology that's available today. And then the last but not least, obviously, you have to convince yourself that there's value there. Why else spend any time working on something else? Just maintain the status quo. So obviously in ExxonMobil, we're convinced there's added value, or we wouldn't have been at this for the last couple of years. We continue to see that value, and that's why we're investing in the field trial to demonstrate that value and share that both internally, obviously, with our stakeholders that are making this investment in the business line, as well as externally with the industry, so we can learn from each other. So I'm going to be pretty brief on this slide since I used up a fair amount of my time. I just put some notes here really on why OPA. I think I've touched on several of these aspects during the prior two slides. I mentioned the value aspect. I think one of the things we're all after is obviously reducing total cost of ownership, right? And so OPA is in a unique place of evolution, right? And so folks that know a lot about OPA or a little bit about OPA, obviously one of the feedback I often get is how can you implement a system, a heterogeneous system of products from numerous suppliers and deliver that with lower lifecycle cost, right? How can you do that? That doesn't seem practical, right? A single source supplier, that seems like it would be a single throat to choke kind of concept, cheaper way of doing it, right? But there's a couple of angles there, and I won't go into the weeds on this, but obviously one of the thrust here is really separating software from hardware, right? That allows you to have interchangeability and optionality in what you're doing in the hardware layer, which breeds additional competition for who's building the controller of tomorrow. Is that your traditional, what I would call a DCS supplier, or is that your IT company that's building computers that you go and buy a laptop, right? I'm trying not to name names here, right? So I think that's one of the angles, right? But then folks say, okay, well then the software is going to cost me more, right? Because you got to make money somewhere. Well, yeah, possibly. But the software that's going to cost you more is going to make you more money because it's going to be more specialized for your business need, what problem I need to solve, right? And so it's really the technology innovation is being pushed into the software layer, and that's where you have, as a business, have a decision of how you make money with that differentiated software, as well as the ability to do more in-house innovation at the software layer. Again, I could go into a lot of other tangents on this one, and happy to have folks throw rocks at me or ask questions during the panel session on that subject. Why now? I could be cliche and say, why not? But the reality is we're all facing increasing pressure, especially from an oil and gas perspective, largely in a commodities-based marketplace, to increase profitability through both lowering total cost of ownership or lowering cost and increasing value. And we really see as OPA providing the enablement to really scratch at both of those, to reduce that total cost of ownership I already spoke to, but allow us to do that innovation, that differentiation in some of our way we deploy advanced control, optimization, and other analytics within the control system, that we can make money from our application engineering and analytics prowess, obviously tapping into our workforce, our people within ExxonMobil. I think, some of the why now things typically that resonates within ExxonMobil is obviously the changing workforce. I think being able to field a solution that gives your application and process control resources as well as your operational resources greater flexibility in how they deploy their solutions, how they operate their plant, based on what their skills and their motivated ability sets are, has changed over the past 5, 10, 15 years, right? And trying to keep up with that evolution and allowing your application engineers to implement process control applications using the classic one people throw around is Python-based. I don't really care what the language is, but having that optionality, that term I keep reusing, is critical to our success in being able to tap into the talent that comes in, whether it's from university or from experienced hires in the marketplace. As that's evolving, we're able to adapt to that and give those options to our workforce on how they implement the solutions. And so I mentioned the digital transformation. Obviously, we see OPA in ExxonMobil as an important component of our transformation journey that we're currently on. And that's obviously a motivation behind investing not only in stuff, all the digital stuff, a lot of what was talked about at the session earlier, which is mainly at the business network, but seeing that transformation the whole way down and including at the sensor level. So last couple of remarks, and I'll be brief. Really, it's more of, again, a little bit of a self-serving sales pitch, so bear with me. My focus is, the time is now. I could say, well, why is ExxonMobil up here? Why am I up here messaging and marketing, if you will, on why OPA is good and why we should all be investing time and money and interest in OPA? Really, it's not about the field trial, right? The reason ExxonMobil is doing the field trial, again, yes, it does give the business return. So there's value in that investment. It manages obsolescence, as I already talked about. But really, we're doing this on behalf of industry to seed the marketplace, right? You have to create the supply-demand balance, right? As end users and operating companies, if we're going to institutionalize change and really push OPA as an option in the marketplace, you have to start somewhere, right? You have to create the demand. Obviously, that demand and OPA as a whole has to be underpinned by the standards. I know I've mentioned that a couple times. And so really the ask, or the implore here is really, be part of the future, right? Be part of setting the standards here today. This year is a critical year, 2023 into 2024. ExxonMobil, obviously, as well as several other operating companies, have announced plans to do test beds and field trials and invest in building that hands-on capability and seeding that demand. Now is the time. I think we have a year, 2 or 3 window to really be transformational change. And, I'd love the help. ExxonMobil, again, I would just offer, always willing to share, bring people in, show the test bed, talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and figure out how we can collaborate and move forward. So thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to catch up.